So I hope you enjoyed the last lesson, and I hope that you've completed the exercise that came with it, because they are very useful in consolidating the knowledge you've learned over the lesson. Now, let's move on to the second lesson on processes. Previously, we learned that objects describe what exists in a system. Now, processes, on the other hand, actually describe what happened to these objects. For example, you can have driving as a process and also data transmitting, which is something we can't see or hear, but it's still a process. And a process like thinking, which is intangible as well, is also considered a process in OpCloud. Now, processes are represented by ellipses with a blue border by default, so we can have data transmitting as a process, driving, or thinking as a process. So in terms of the naming conventions, for processes, we always name them in gerund form, which means verb plus ing, with the first letter of each word capitalized, just like objects. So if you have a process called flight, instead of flight, you should name it as flying. And if you have a process called construction, you should name it as building instead. And similar to objects, processes need to be uniquely named. So when it comes to building, if you have a different process for apartment and also mansion, then you need to name these two processes differently as apartment building and mansion building as an example. And now let's take a look at creating processes in OpCloud before we move on. So to create a process in OpCloud, we'll follow a similar procedure as with objects. Just find the process representation at the top menu bar and drag it into your canvas. Then you'll have a process here for you to rename and use in your model. So previously we talked about the formal definition of a process, where processes are things that transform objects. Well, what is transformation? In OPM, transformation can be either the creation or consumption of an object or the effect it has on an object. Let's take driving as our example again. Driving consumes fuel, and it also generates emission. And finally, it changes the location of a passenger from origin to destination. So this is the effect it has on passenger. In OPM, there's a principle called the object transformation by process principle, which states that every process in an OPM model must be connected to at least one object that it transforms. If a process doesn't transform anything in your OPM model, chances are it doesn't belong to the model, because a process that is not transforming anything serves no function in the system. So as a modeling tip, you should always check and ensure every process in your model is transforming at least something. You may not have all of the information in the beginning of your modeling process, but as a final sanity check, you should always go back and make sure all of the processes are transforming at least one object.